Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that despite all your good intentions, your spiritual life feels, well, thin, like it's just slipped through your fingers somehow. It's a feeling I think many of us can relate to. We set out wanting to grow, to be more centered, more resilient, but daily life just seems to pull us everywhere else. So for this deep dive, we're really unpacking a core idea, that deep spiritual formation, genuine holiness, it doesn't just happen by accident. It really seems to happen by design.
Yeah, and what's really interesting as we've gone through all this material on habits of grace, training the soul like a muscle, it's just how practical it all is. Our mission today really is to figure out how these intentional practices, these small, maybe overlooked daily rhythms, can actually cultivate Christ-like character and build this incredible inner resilience, which feels so crucial right now, doesn't it? We're aiming to connect some ancient wisdom with some pretty compelling modern science to show you exactly how this works.
It's just so easy to think spiritual growth is passive, right? Like you just absorb it or it happens to you. We hear phrases like falling into sin all the time, like it's a sudden crash, an ambush you couldn't see coming. But the sources we looked at, they paint a much more nuanced picture, and I think a more honest one. Sin, they argue, isn't usually that sudden pitfall. It's more often a slow drift, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the direction you've been walking, maybe for a long time.
That slow drift idea is really powerful because it shows how those subtle daily choices or even not making intentional choices shape us. And it's not just about drifting away from spiritual health. It works the other way too. Sanctification, becoming more like Christ. It's described in a similar way, not some mystical zap or accidentally stumbling into being good, but as a slow architecture of the soul. Brick by brick, habit by habit, grace upon grace. It's like a fire you have to cultivate intentionally, consistently, over time.
And I think that dilemma is so clear in modern life. I mean, we're always connected. Remote work blurs the lines. Burnout seems like it's everywhere. Digital distractions are constant. Sources talk about this kind of spiritual fatigue. It's almost like we treat spiritual formation as just a side hobby,
Yeah.
Something optional, not foundational.
Exactly. And that's where the core problem lies, but also the solution. Research suggests habits make up maybe 40% of our daily actions, often on total autopilot. The big insight here is that we can actually flip that. We can harness this tendency for repetition and direct it intentionally. That, the sources suggest, is maybe the single greatest lever for lasting transformation.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. How neuroscience, especially neuroplasticity, actually backs up these ancient spiritual truths that, saints and mystics practiced intuitively for ages. So neuroplasticity, for anyone unfamiliar, is just the brain's amazing ability to reorganize itself, to literally create new neural pathways, strengthen old ones, just through repeated actions and thoughts. You're physically reshaping your brain by what you do.
And it connects so directly to biblical concepts. It's actually quite profound, that scientific idea. Neurons that fire together, wire together, basically do something off and the brain connection gets stronger. It echoes biblical anthropology perfectly. We literally become what we repeatedly do.
Yeah.
Think about Proverbs 23.7, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. That's not just a nice metaphor for character. It's a deep truth about our internal wiring, how our consistent thoughts and actions shape who we are.
Yeah, and then you look at Romans 12.2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That word transform, in the original Greek, it's metamorpho. It's the same word used for Christ's transfiguration, that radical visible change on the mountain. So if we're called to metamorpho, it's not just a little tweak. And the fact that it happens through renewal, well, that clearly points to a process, right? Not just a single moment. A continuous reshaping.
Precisely. So what this all means is that spiritual disciplines, they aren't just pious suggestions or nice things to do if you find some extra time. The sources frame them really powerfully as a spiritual neuroplasticity toolkit, something the church understood and used way before science gave it a name. And the goal isn't just changing behavior on the surface. It's deep internal heart transformation. It's about literally building pathways in your soul toward Christlikeness, much like you build pathways in your brain.
Okay, so let's shift to the practical stuff then. These aren't meant to be obligations or rigid rules. The sources kept calling them invitations to cultivate Christlikeness. And I really like this image they used. Think of these habits not as burdens, but as trellises, like a structure for your spiritual life to grow on. A vine needs that support to flourish and bear fruit, right? Our souls need these rhythms too.
Absolutely. It's all about intentional engagement with these core habits.
So first up, scripture.
Yeah, the sources stress that scripture is not just information, it's formation. It actively recalibrates our imagination, helps us see the world, our problems, our future through God's lens, not just our own. It feeds the soul, like bread feeds the body, Matthew 4.4, Essential for spiritual life. So
Okay.
practices like daily reading or meditating, using Lectio Divina, that's slow, prayerful reading or memorization, they aren't just about knowing stuff. They're designed to literally train the soul to hear God's voice, to let the words sink in so deeply it actually guides you.
And then prayer. What about that?
Prayer is described as breathing the breath of heaven. It's much more than just asking for things. It's this relational conversation that fundamentally trains our attention toward God. It helps align our will with His. Jesus modeled this, right? Getting up early, seeking solitude to pray, like in Mark 1.35. And that whole idea of praying without ceasing from First Thessalonians, it's not about talking constantly. It's about cultivating this deep, ongoing intimacy with God, where your heart is just always turned towards Him, a constant connection.
Okay, next, silence and solitude. These feel almost radical today.
They really do. The sources call them an act of resistance and trust in our noisy world. In that solitude, away from all the dings and demands, we hear the whisper that often gets drowned out. It's in that quiet space we actually make room to listen to ourselves and to God.
And two really critical rhythms, worship and Sabbath.
Right. Worship first, it trains our affections. That saying, you are what you adore, it hits home here. Worship is about intentionally reordering what we love, what we value most, aligning our desires with God's. And Sabbath, that reorders our time. It's this weekly, tangible way of saying we trust God's enough. It signals you are not what you produce. Mark 2.27 is key. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. It's a gift. Rest, remembering, letting go of that need to always achieve.
And vital for our relationships, spiritually speaking, confession and community.
Confession is framed as the courage to be known, a surrender, not shame. When we bring what's hidden into the light, healing happens in the light, like 1 John 1.9 says. It's vulnerable, but incredibly freeing. And then community. That's the crucible of formation, where iron sharpens iron, like in Proverbs. In that shared journey, vulnerability is the currency. That's what fosters real growth, accountability, belonging. It's where our rough edges get smoothed out and we learn how to love others, imperfections and all, just like we're loved.
Okay, and finally, turning outwards. Service and sacrifice.
Yeah, this is about reorienting the self, moving from just consuming to contributing. Jesus was the ultimate example, wasn't he?
Wow.
Saying he came not to be served, but to serve in Mark 10. When our service actually costs us something, time, comfort, pride, that's when it becomes a spiritual act of worship, according to Romans 12.1. And the sources also touch on fasting here, another practice that helps retrain our desires, cultivate discernment. By denying the body something, we kind of awaken a deeper spiritual hunger, prioritizing something beyond immediate wants.
What strikes me about all these is that they're meant to be not mechanical, but mystical. It's not about just checking boxes. They provide the actual structure through which spiritual life can grow.
Yeah.
Like that trellis for the vine in John 15.
Right.
It's where our effort meets God's grace, right?
Exactly. And this is where it gets really practical for everyday life. These habits aren't just for, monks or Sundays. They're training grounds for faithful presence in every context of your life. They shape who you are everywhere.
Okay, like in leadership, for example.
Yeah, leaders formed by these habits, they tend to lead from depth, not ego. They listen before they speak. They act with conviction that's rooted deeper than just ambition. And practicing Sabbath for a leader, that's huge. It's an act of trust. It tells your team, your organization, and maybe most importantly tells you the world can go on without you for a bit. That fosters a much healthier, less anxious culture.
I can see that. And in relationships.
Well, grace-formed people bring patience, humility, real presence to how they interact. They cultivate empathy, forgiveness, drawing on things like confession, soaking in scripture. And that leads to deeper connections, better conflict resolution, being able to really see and love others, even when it's tough.
What about creativity and work? How does this fit in?
When we see our work not just as productivity, but as vocation, offering our work as worship, like 1 Corinthians 10.31 suggests, that changes everything. It elevates how we build, teach, communicate, innovate. Every task can become an offering. It infuses meaning into the daily grind.
And family life.
Hugely impactful there because, like the sources say, habits are contagious. When kids see parents engaging in things like mealtime prayer, weekly Sabbath, open confession, not perfectly, but genuinely it teaches them what following Christ looks like practically. These rhythms shape the spiritual DNA of the home, build that shared foundation.
Okay, and the really tough one, crisis.
Yeah, that's often where our true formation shows up, isn't it? When things fall apart, we tend to default to our training, not magically rise to the occasion. People who've built these spiritual habits, they have this kind of soul muscle memory. Their reflex isn't just panic. It might be turning to prayer, seeking wisdom in scripture, leaning on their community. That's the fruit of consistent, intentional practice over time.
So the way forward,
Mm.
it sounds like it's not about trying harder, but to train wisely, making room for grace to work. It's about smart effort.
Exactly. And it really highlights what the sources call small hinges swinging big doors.
Yeah.
God doesn't seem to need these grand gestures to form us. He worked through mustard seeds, those small, consistent acts of faithfulness that, added up, create huge change.
So any concrete next steps people could take?
Well, one suggestion was a 30-day Christ-like practice plan. Just pick one habit, maybe 15 minutes of scripture in the morning, 10 minutes of prayer, even just 5 minutes of silence, and commit to it daily for a month. Remember, the sources stress repetition, not intensity, is what rewires the soul. Another idea was a weekly grace audit. Set aside maybe 15, 30 minutes, maybe Sunday evening. Just review the week. Where did you see grace? Where did you struggle? Then plan maybe one faithful step for the week ahead. It's not a performance review for God. It's more like a soul check-in for you. Pause, reflect, recenter.
I like that. These tools aren't about instant perfection. They're about becoming maybe slowly the kind of person who turns to scripture before scrolling or who breathes prayer before reacting when stressed. The goal is progression, not perfection, right? One small step after another.
Exactly. And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. You are always becoming something. This whole transformation journey, it isn't about finishing fast or being perfect. It's really about faithfully trusting the sculptor who is at work within you.
So what habits are forming you? It's definitely a question worth sitting with. But maybe take heart in this. You're not walking this path alone. And you're certainly not being shaped without purpose. We really hope you'll keep exploring these ideas, maybe start integrating them into the fabric of your own life.